So I would like to start by saying that it's really a great honor for me to be here and to give a presentation. I really thank very much the organizers and the organizing committee for giving me this chance. So since it is the first talk of this conference, I decided to make it a bit historical and kind of a review talk, and there will be some new results, but more towards the end of the talk. I would like to start by celebrating an anniversary. And this anniversary is the birth, 80 years ago, right, 80 years ago, of a new liquid which appeared in the laboratory. And this was reported by a back-to-back publication in Nature by Kapitsa in Moscow and Allen and Misner in Cambridge, which was the birth of superfluid liquid helium. What they found is that below the lambda point, which was around 2.2 Kelvin, the viscosity of this fluid was reduced by at least 3 orders of magnitude. And his publication, Kapitsa, concluded by saying the present limit on the viscosity perhaps is sufficient to suggest, by analogy with superconductors, that the helium below the lambda point enters a special state which might be called superfluid. And that coined really the term superfluid right at the beginning. I continue with a history, and like any fairy tale, it starts by once upon a time, long, long ago, there were refugees in Western Europe. This may sound familiar now, but it was already true at that time. And the two persons I have in mind are London on the one hand and Tisza on the other hand. London was coming from Germany, which he had to leave because of the racial law. He went to UK and then to France, again in 1938, where our story takes place. And then France was not that safe at that time, so he went to the USA. The second person is László Tisza, who was from Hungary. He went to USSR. He had also to leave USSR because of anti-Semitism. Then he came to France, again at this particular year, 1938. And again, he had to move to the USA later. So these two gentlemen met in Paris, and 2 months only after the publication by Kapitsa and Allen and Misner, they tried to understand this superfluid state of liquid helium. Fritz London was the first one to publish a letter in Nature making the connection between what was observed in the lab and the mysterious condensation that had been predicted by Einstein something like 14 years ago, but no one had taken really seriously. Tisza made one step further and introduced the two-fluid model, which is the one I want to talk about today. Tisza wrote, the fraction of a substance consisting of atoms in the lowest energy state will perform as a superfluid liquid. This is the Bose-Einstein condensate. The atoms in excited state behave like a gas. And thus, the total flow, the kind of two-fluid, represents a rather complex combination of both effects. So the two-fluid model was born at that time. A few years later, Landau arrived, and Landau made really the two-fluid model something very concrete and very solid on which we can make theoretical prediction. Actually, Landau knew very well Tisza because Tisza had been, when Tisza was in the USSR, Tisza was a student of Landau. He was number 5 in the famous Landau school. But however, Landau, in his publication in 1941, was not very kind with Tisza because he started his own paper by saying that Tisza's well-known attempt to consider helium-2 cannot be accepted as satisfactory because Landau didn't like the idea that superfluidity was related to Bose-Einstein condensation. So Landau didn't want to treat the liquid as an ideal gas, which makes sense. And so he considered that Tisza's approach was self-contradictory. And Landau's own approach was actually not referring at all to atoms. It was purely hydrodynamic, but it was very powerful. And let me review it now because it is now on which I will build the more modern result. The essence of Landau model was to consider, again, a fluid with two components, a superfluid characterized by a density ρS, a normal characterized by a density ρn, and then you have a velocity field, Vs and Vn, which are associated to both components. And all the model of Landau, and this is really very, very elegant, is built on two hypotheses, and only two. The first hypothesis is the fact that the entropy of the fluid, the way the entropy flows in the fluid, is attributed only entirely to the normal fluid, to the velocity Vn here. And then the second hypothesis is the fact that the superfluid flow, characterized again by this velocity Vs, is irrotational. That is, except if you except for quantized vortices, which are not relevant for what I will discuss today, because I will discuss about sound waves, you can consider that the curl of Vs is 0 and remains 0 every time, all the time. And with only these two hypotheses, Landau could build his model and made some novel prediction. A spectacular prediction, which was, we will see, checked a few years later, was about the sound propagation. So Landau made an assumption that the fluid was in equilibrium. That is, it was it could be described by hydrodynamics. So he was looking at a weak perturbation, a sound wave, with a very low frequency omega, and he assumed that this frequency was low enough, or if you prefer, the wavelength was long enough to have local equilibrium in the fluid. And this means, this will be important for the following, this means two conditions. The first one is superfluid hydrodynamics, that is, omega has to be small compared to the frequencies associated with interactions, or if you prefer, in modern language, the wavelength of the sound wave has to be very large compared to the healing length of the superfluid. And also, it assumes that we have normal hydrodynamics for the normal component, which means that the frequency of the sound wave, omega, has to be much smaller than the collision rate, gamma col, or if you prefer, the wavelength has to be very large compared to the mean free path. And if you assume this local equilibrium, then you can write, for your two-fluid model, two wave equations. A wave equation, as usual, expresses a second-order time derivative on the left hand and a second-order spatial derivative on the right-hand side. And the first equation is the one we are used to describe sound waves in normal air, like me speaking to you. So the d2 times total density over dt squared is equal to the Laplacian of the pressure. And the second equation involves specifically the two-fluid model because it involves rho s over rho n. It relates the time derivative of the entropy per unit mass, S tilde, to the Laplacian of the temperature. And now, instead of one wave equation, as usual, you have two wave equations. So instead of getting an equation of the type omega square, the frequency called c square, the velocity of sound, times k square, the wave vector, you get a bi-square equation, which is of the type, instead of having c square, you have c4. So you have c4 minus alpha c square plus beta, where the coefficient alpha and beta here are functions of the thermodynamic quantities, the way you will relate, say, the entropy and the pressure to the density and to the temperature. And also, because of this factor here, this rho s over rho n, it's a function of the ratio between superfluid to normal density. And this is really remarkable. It is remarkable because it tells you that if you have a fluid and if you know the equation of state, that is, you have measured how the pressure varies with the density and the temperature, which we can all do in a laboratory. So you know that. You measure the sound speed, so you will have two sound speed in the medium. And from that, you can extract the value of rho s over rho n. That is, you may know how your fluid is composed of a superfluid and a normal. And Landau's prediction was indeed verified a few years later by Peshkov, where Peshkov could see two branches of sound, so the two roots of this equation, which were called first sound and second sound. So now, why is the two-fluid model good for atomic and molecular physics, what we are all doing in our lab? The first thing we can think of is weakly interacting 3D Bose gas. There, I would say the two-fluid model is not so useful per se, in the sense that we can have a very good microscopic description. We can start with a standard BEC, we can use Bogolyubov approximation, or Bogolyubov analysis, and this works quantitatively well. So in this case, the superfluid fraction, the rho s that I introduced before, is just the Bose-Conan fraction, and the two-fluid model gives the same result as, say, Bogolyubov theory or slightly improved Bogolyubov theory. And along this line, I have to mention that sound waves were first observed at MIT in the group of Wolfgang Ketterle, and then later at Utrecht with a more sophisticated experiment in the group of Peter van der Straten. Now, there are instances where this weakly interacting 3D Bose gas limit doesn't work, and the first one is the case of strongly interacting system, in particular fermions. There, the two-fluid model is really useful, and actually, it was used in the group of Rudi Grib at Innsbruck a few years ago to study first sound and second sound, again, in a strongly interacting gas of fermions. where the two branches of sound could be seen as a function. So here I plot the velocity of sound as a function of the temperature. And there are some, on the same system, some recent yet unpublished results from Martin's Wehrlein group at MIT. Another situation where the two-field model is really useful is the two-dimensional system, either Bose or Fermi gas. And the reason for that is because when you are dealing with two-dimensional system, and if you take the thermodynamic limit on the uniform system, you don't expect to get any condensation. This is because in 2D you have not enough neighbors, so to speak, to get a true long-range order, and you have the Mermin-Wagner theorem, which prevents you to get a Bose-Einstein condensation. However, a uniform system can still become superfluid because of the Berezinski-Kosterlitz-Thouless transition that I will discuss in a moment, and therefore you are precisely in a situation where the two-fluid model can be very useful. So let me now make a detour towards two-dimensional physics. Why is the superfluid transition in 2D interesting? Why do we want to study that? Well, the main reason is that it's because it is not a standard phase transition, precisely because of this Mermin-Wagner theorem. It is a topological phase transition in the sense that it does not correspond to a breaking of a standard symmetry. And the novelty of this transition that you get in 2D was acknowledged by the Nobel Prize 2 years ago, given to Kosterlitz, Thouless, and Haldane, and precisely for this work by Kosterlitz and Thouless, and also Berezinski, who died some years ago, that the Nobel Prize was awarded for theoretical discoveries of topological phase transition. So let me say a bit more about this phase transition in 2D, and then I will come back to the two-fluid model. So the BKT transition, Berezinski, Kosterlitz, Thouless, transition in an interacting 2D Bose fluid, as I said, cannot correspond, by definition, to Bose-Einstein condensation, because in a 2D system, again, you have not enough neighbors to maintain a true long-range order, so the one-body correlation function G1 has to tend to 0 at infinity. If we had a condensate, it would tend to a non-zero value, but here it has to tend to 0 at infinity. So the transition that we get is actually a transition between two kinds of disordered phase, okay? Because this tends to 0, it means you have no phase order in the system. So the transition, the BKT transition is between two kinds of disordered phase corresponding to different G1 function. At large temperature, you have a normal state, and G1 decays very fast to infinity. It decays exponentially fast, like this. Whereas when you cool the system, when you cross the TC, the transition temperature, then G1 still decays to 0, but much more slowly in an algebraic way. And this is this difference in the decay, which is a signature of the transition. And you probably have seen this cartoon before. The microscopic origin of the transition is actually the unbinding of vortex pairs. Vortices are always present in this system if the temperature is non-zero, but below TC, they only exist under the form of bound pairs, and then they don't play much role in the superfluid properties, whereas above TC, this pair breaks, and then the proliferation of free vortices is sufficient to kill superfluidity. And this transition was observed a few years after the prediction by BKT, by Bishop and Rapie on a helium film on a substrate. Something which is very important for this BKT transition is the so-called universal jump. This BKT transition is a special phase transition, this topological phase transition, because it is of infinite order, which means that all thermodynamic functions, pressure, density, entropy, they are all continuous at the transition point. There is no discontinuity, no cusp. However, the superfluid density, which is not a thermodynamic quantity, is discontinuous. More specifically, if, again, I take this diagram where I vary the temperature here, in the normal state, the superfluid density is 0 by definition, whereas right before TC, the superfluid density is always larger than 4 over lambda square, where lambda is the thermal wavelength. Which means that if I look at the transition point, there is a jump which is universal, independent of the strength of the interaction in the fluid, which is such that delta ROS lambda square jumps from 4 to 0 right at the transition point. And this can be checked numerically. Here I show some data from a Monte Carlo simulation by Prokofiev and Fissunov. Here I take a typical interaction strength for a weakly interacting 2D Bose gas, like the one I will show later in our lab. So in 2D, interactions are characterized by a dimensionless parameter, and this dimensionless parameter is small compared to 1, so it's weakly interacting. In our case, it's typically 0.1. And here I plot the superfluid fraction as a function of the temperature. So again, 0 above TC. And around TC here, when I plug the value rho s lambda square for our experimental parameter, the superfluid density rho s is on the order of the normal density rho n. So the two fluids have typically the same density at this point. And when I reduce the temperature and goes to T equals 0, then, of course, everything becomes superfluid. OK, so these are interesting properties. Let me briefly review what is known from AMO physics on this BKT transition. There has been a lot of activity over the last 10 to 15 years on these 2D systems in our field. So let me review what is known. So first, the existence of a critical point. This is for sure, this has been proven. Actually, there was an experiment that we did a long time ago together with Zoran Adzibabich, who is in the audience, who have shown first this existence of a critical point, and then it was confirmed better by many groups. The vortices, which are, as I said, the microscopic object which drive the transition, has been observed. The superfluid behavior has also been seen in these 2D systems. Something which I think there is still margin of progression is the evidence for algebraic decay. Several groups have measured something which decay algebraically at infinity, but the exponent that is measured in the labs is often very large compared to the upper theoretical bound. Theoretically, this alpha coefficient here should always be lower than 1/4, whereas what is measured in the experiment is quite often larger than 1 and even sometimes larger than 2, which means that there are probably some imperfection in the experimental system that limit the value of alpha. So there is still some margin of progression on that. Maybe we'll learn more in this conference about that. And another feature that has been proven for this 2D system is the scale invariance of the equation of state, at least for weakly interacting gases. When it is strongly interacting, it's become more complicated. And again, we will learn more about that in the conference. But for weakly interacting both gas, when G tilde is small compared to 1, you have a scale invariance, which means that actually your equation of state, instead of depending separately of chemical potential, say, and temperature, the equation of state depends only on one parameter, which is a ratio between these two parameters, mu over kT, or if you prefer, the equation of state depends only on the ratio T over Tc. OK. Now, what you can see is that in this list, there is one item missing, which is the universal jump. Here, I didn't say anything about the universal jump. This has not been checked yet. How can this be seen? And the answer came recently by Sandro Sungari and Ozawa, his postdoc, that you should look at the sound propagation. So back to the two-fluid model. So Sandro and Ozawa actually applied the two-fluid model to a 2D system. And what they showed first is that if you calculate the sound velocity in the system, you measure it with respect to the Bogoliubov speed C0. Because of scale invariance I just mentioned, it's just a function of T over Tc. And most remarkably, when you plot this, you find two sounds in the superfluid region, only one sound in the normal region. This makes sense. But what is very important is that the jump of the superfluid density that I mentioned translates into a jump of the two sound velocities here. So in principle, if you can measure this sound velocity, assuming superfluid and normal hydrodynamics, you should observe a jump which should reflect this superfluid jump. And something which is also important for the following is that when you analyze these two modes in more detail, if you say that you are going to excite this sound wave by density perturbation, you find that actually you excite essentially here in this region the second sound branch. So this is what we are going to do. So I come to our experiment. We start with a 2D Bose gas, which is confined strongly along the vertical direction. So it's a pancake here. The confinement frequency is large compared to temperature and interaction energy. Our gas is uniform. It is confined in a rectangular box using a digital mirror device, which we image on our system. And we have a surface densities, typically 10 to 100 atoms per micrometer square. And in order to excite a sound wave, we apply on the top part of the gas here a repulsive potential which slightly depletes the density. You may see that the blue here is slightly fainter than on the rest of the rectangle. And then at a given time, we suddenly remove this potential, repulsive potential, so that then the potential become uniform. And we look how the density dip here propagates back and forth into the box. Okay, thank you. Okay, so what we see is a density dip which propagates back and forth like this, and this is a way, so this is time here, and this is the integrated density along y. We see indeed a multiple bounce of the wave packet. So we analyze this in more detail by projecting onto the eigenbox of the board, and we see a velocity of 1.5 millimeter per second. So this is a summary of our results. Nice thing is that all our points here fall on the same curve, and this confirms the scale invariance of the gas and the fact that the thermodynamic quantity depends only on mu over kT. We see the second sound in a 2D Bose gas. This is the first time it is seen. I mean, it was not seen with liquid helium because of the substrate, which was blocking the sound. And we have no evidence for the first sound. What is more surprising is when we go above TC. There, above TC, we don't recover at all the prediction of the second sound approach. And the reason for that, we believe, is that because our sample is not at all in the thermodynamic equilibrium for the thermal component. So actually, we violate or we do not fulfill completely the condition gamma col very large compared to omega. Gamma col over omega is just on the order of 1 to 4, and therefore we do not fulfill that. Let me simply say that there have been recent theoretical approaches. Since our experiment is not going to the theory, thanks to the theory, they came to us, and now the prediction from the theory, in this case, where we are not exactly at local equilibrium, the theory groups, both from Trento and also from Padova, now predicts that we should observe some collisionless sound here in this region, which confirms our result. So I see that my time is nearly over, so I will skip over more results that we have seen on this gas. I will be happy to answer questions on that. And let me simply conclude now. What I would like to say is that this 80-year-old two-fluid model is still a very useful tool, in particular in AMO physics, in situations where a true condensate does not exist. And I have given here the example of 2D physics. Speaking of 2D physics, AMO has really brought several original contributions to test various aspects of the BKT mechanism. Here I've discussed the second sound, which was seen, as I said, for the first time in this system. And there remains some important feature of 2D physics to be validated: algebraic order and the universal jump, which was our initial motivation, but we couldn't see because of this lack of thermodynamic equilibrium for the normal component in our system. And I finished by showing our team at Collège de France, and I would like to say that the work I reported is mostly the PhD work of Jean Louville here and Raphaël Saint-Jalm here. Thank you very much for your attention.